Welcome back, CS Tool Openers. This will be a short video introduction to DrJava's debugger. This is in support of a project problem called DebugMe, in which you have to do some serious debugging in order to make it through a particular problem, provided with certain inputs that will avoid failures and reach the end of the program. So what we'll be doing here mainly involves a single file, and somewhere in your project pack should be a directory named DebugMe, and within that should be a DebugMe.java file, which I'll pull over into DrJava. And since we'll be mainly working in DrJava, I'm going to make this as big as possible so you can see as much as possible. Some of the action is going to happen down here at the interactions pane, so I will make that a little bit bigger. But this should compile right out of the bat, the DebugMe.java file. And you should be able to run it as well right off the bat, although it will provide a sort of deflating message about scoring 0 out of 55 points. That'll be something that we'll be concerned with improving, getting all the way up to that 55 out of 55 points. In order to do that, you'll have to understand something about the execution of this DebugMe program. It's mainly tied to command line inputs. So if I pull up that previous run DebugMe business, one of the first things that you'll need to start doing is punching in your own net ID. That's the first part of your GMU email address. Mine is ckofma2, and yours is probably some combination of the first letter of your first name, some part of your last name, and probably some number if you have a common combination of those things. Still, even after doing this, I'll start getting bad stuff that comes out. And what will be eventually required is to punch in a whole bunch of other arguments over here about hellos and goodbyes and so forth, some of which are numeric, and that will be the case for the first few. But there will be 29 total of these that you have to figure out a pattern of relationships between groups of them. So expect to do a lot of command history and keep careful track of those command lines as you make progress so that you don't lose any progress, because mainly this problem will be graded on TAs running your inputs, your command line inputs into the programming and seeing how many points you pop up. You can try to examine the main method for this. It's a little bit snaky, but part of what makes it interesting is the fact that this net ID, that is the first argument that's always passed in, is hashed, which is a Java-provided facility to convert a string into a number. These numbers aren't unique necessarily, so multiple strings may have the same hash value. But what it does create is probably a unique run for you, so that the inputs that you use, if you're actually using your net ID, will not necessarily correspond to the same inputs that your pals need to use in order to pass through the entire program. So make sure to be working on this with some individuality, as you won't necessarily be able to copy off others in order to get the right inputs to work through the entire thing. So in DrJava, the main sort of execution cycle here is going to be to look for the various phases that happen. You'll see in here a list of phase 1 has started, and so these are named very uncreatively as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. You can see phase 1 listed here and phase 2 down here. Since we haven't even passed through the first phase yet, our first goal is going to be to work our way into this function. The source code is down below, lower in the file, but we'll get there in just a second. And what I really want to do at this point is demonstrate how do you stop the program at this point and start stepping through it step by step. So let me punch in a breakpoint here. This is easy to do in DrJava, and a right click and you toggle a breakpoint and you'll see a big right redness show up here, which is an indication that in debug mode DrJava is going to stop execution here and allow you to start introspecting, examining variables, printing things, potentially even making changes. Now, if I punch over to the interactions pane, I want to pass in command line arguments like that ckofma2. So let me run this thing quick. And you'll notice that nothing fun happened, no stoppage. The only irritating part about this is DrJava needs to be put into debug mode so that it knows to stop at spots. So up here there is a spot in the debugger menu that you should be able to turn on debug mode, which will open up this additional frame. One quick note, if you're using the official version of DrJava, which comes from the DrJava website, you may not see this debugger menu. It's a program that has not necessarily been The official version of DrJava hasn't been well maintained over the last few years. So with the newer versions of Java 1.7 and 1.8, some platforms experience some incompatibilities with the debugger facilities. As far as we know, the unofficial version that we provide through GMU, which is located in a website that should be very apparent from our class website. Search for it if you haven't done so already. That newer version has better compatibility. But if you don't see that debugger menu, find someone to help you get it up there, because it will be more or less essential for this particular exercise. Anyway, now that I have debugger mode turned on, you see the little diamond here indicating it's on. If I run this thing one more time with command line arguments, I should pause right at that phase. You can see the highlight blue and things populated here indicating that we've hit a breakpoint, which means our program's now in suspend animation and we can move forward step by step in time. Few buttons over here to bear in mind. The step series of buttons allows you to take individual steps. In particular, we're interested right now is moving into this phase 1 function, which is done via a step into call. There's also a step over, which will move over a function call. For instance, if I punched it now, it would move over this to the score designation, or potentially out if there's an exception thrown. And also a step out, which will finish whatever function I'm running right now. I'll punch the step into, which will transport me down here to the phase 1 business. Now, what's nice about the debugger is you can start asking about what values particular things have. You notice up here there's a hash, an args, and an argstart argument. You can immediately just punch those names into DrJava's interactive mode, and the debugger will pop out the values that are given. 2879 for me, and again, that's based on my NetID C-COFMA2. Yours is likely to be different, which will give your runs of this program its own little special sauce. Also interested in args, and you'll see there's my C-COFMA2, but I didn't provide any other command line arguments, so these are all filled in as blank. And argstart is 1, and a minor hint on that, argstart will usually be where it's looking for command line arguments in this big array. Since this is the first phase, it'll start at index 1, skipping over the C-COFMA2 business. So, let's have a look at what this does. It looks like it's parsing ints that are coming out of those command line args there. So maybe I'm not interested in going into the parse int function, so let me step over that. Oh, crap, okay. So now that I actually think about it, since this thing is blank, if I try and parse an int out of that, that's bound to fail. So first piece of information gained, it looks like there will be 3 calls to parse int there, so I should probably pass in 3 different arguments that are numeric in order to make it through the first few steps of that phase. So at this point, I've lost, and I could step repeatedly through the rest of all this stuff, but probably a better way is to just fast forward. The resume button will immediately begin executing the program again until the next breakpoint is hit. This oftentimes, if you've lost out and don't care to see the rest of the story, punching this will fast forward you to the end. But I have gained one useful piece of information. I need numbers for this. So let me come back here, and I'll just try 3 zeros as a way to make some progress there. Debug mode's still on. I still have my little panel here, so I can punch enter again, and I will hit the same breakpoint, but this time args will be different. I can check that here with args, and you'll see the 000 here, which should allow me to make a little bit of progress. Still stepping into the function, but this time as I step over, I should actually see these A, B, and C values populated. So at this point, now that I've stepped over, those names have definition. Here's A and B and C. They're zeros, as we sort of expected, based on the args that I passed in. The interesting part is here, that if I step over this next call, A's value will have changed from whatever it was, 0 to 39. Now you might try to do that computation in your head or by hand of, okay, whatever hash was, that was based on my net ID, and it was 2879. And if I modulo that 40, I guess I'm getting 39 because A was added on to that. This is what makes the debugger rather nice, is that you don't necessarily have to do all those things in your head. You can instead just let the code execute and see what the result is. But at this point, you'll see this dangerous failure coming up, double debugger burger order up, which will end our run and signal that no more points can be earned. In order to avoid that, we need to make sure that A and B and C, the numbers that are passed in, satisfy this relationship that's given here. Parsing this out, it looks like A is less than B, B is bigger than C, and A is less than C. Okay, so I think I can do this one in my head. B is bigger than A, and B is also bigger than C, so B must be the biggest number passed in. A is less than C, so A must be the smallest number, and C must therefore be something in between those two. Okay, so that makes sense. There's nothing I can do right now to continue forwards, as my A, B, and C values are already set based on the command line inputs, but I have gained one useful piece of information. That is, what should be the relationship between these three numbers in order for me to make through this phase. A needs to be less than B, and C needs to be less than B also, and C needs to be bigger than A. Based on this hash transformation, A is going to become 39 if I set it to be 0. So I think that should be enough for me to put some inputs in. So let me resume. I'll fast forward to the end. I scored nothing, but now I know if I'm going to run this thing again. Let's see. Seem to have lost my command. There it is. Okay. I will try a 0 for A. B has to be the biggest, so maybe I'll pick something large like 100 for that. And C has to be in between A and B, but A is going to have something added onto it, which will make it 39. So let me try something bigger than 39. How about 45? Okay, so I'll run at this point. I'm still hitting that breakpoint. I don't really care to step through necessarily. I just want to know if my guesses have been right so far. So let me just punch resume to fast forward. And I see a game over, but I do see something encouraging. Good for you, time for phase 2, and I've now got myself 5 out of 55 points. So that ostensibly means I've passed phase 1. In order to verify that, I'll come down over here to the breakpoints and get rid of this one so I can just watch the full run through of this thing. And yeah, let's have some fun. Good for you. Time for phase 2, and then oops, game over. But I'm getting my 5 out of 55. So first 3 arguments for me personally, 0, 145, seem to work out. Expect those numbers to be different for you on account of you may need to adjust based on the hash value produced from your unique net ID. The next phase for me will be phase 2. And I would probably scroll down here. Phase 1 is here. I'd try in phase 2, and I'd probably set a breakpoint for that thing and step into it and start examining what are the function arguments that are required for that. And then so on for phase 3, phase 4, and so forth. That will conclude our discussion of DrJava's debugger and how to use it for the DebugMe problem. If you are using a different platform, for instance, Eclipse or NetBeans, the particular instructions to execute your debugger will be different, and I encourage you to find some online resources to explore those. Most IDEs provide debugger facilities. It's a great boon in order to diagnose problems, and learning how to use your own tool and own it is an important part of becoming a mature programmer. If you're a command line person, there are ways to do command line Java debugging, but they're somewhat more tedious and, in my experience, a little bit more prone to breaking. But investigate the JDB Java debugger, which comes with all Java installations, including the OpenJDK free versions and the official Oracle versions. If you want, you can pop that open on command line, and JDB will give you a little bit of information. You can see I've started an interactive loop here, but you'll need to look for another tutorial in order to use that properly. Good luck debugging out there, gang, and I'll see you in class.